Hey, welcome to Vortex Garage, and well, by now you've probably already seen the intro video for the new to us 2004 Jeep Grand Cherokee WJ, and you may have also seen our video where we solved the major electrical gremlins that this truck was having. So now that we've done that, and well, we've also done our headlight video, I figured it's now due time that we finally get this thing up on the lift. So I'm going to bring you along as we check it out. Let's start under the hood first, and we'll take a look at some of what we have under here. All right, we got a little bit of light here as we look around, and well, let's just take a look at our engine. And as you can tell, we have done some cleaning on this since our last time that we showed it to you. And all in all, like I said, I think I called it before a pretty honest engine bay. And I would say that I still agree with that assessment. I don't see any major indications that lots of work was done or that major things were changed. And that can be good and that can be bad depending on the age and mileage. I'd say this is a pretty untouched Grand Cherokee. I don't think it's had too much in the way of repairs, but that does mean that from a maintenance perspective, we're going to want to take a look at a number of things. So first and foremost, in our headlight video and also in our intro video, I think we kind of showed this stuff a little bit. Hopefully you were able to see that rust there. And our headlight on this side was a lot more clearer than the other one. Now it did turn out it was an OEM part, but when I took the grill off and when I took the headlight out, and you can probably see here, see that kind of flaking paint, this bumper cover was repainted at some point, and this headlight, I'm assuming, was replaced as well. From what I can tell, put my light over there, but from what I can tell, this thing probably hit something right here, and it was enough to dent this a little bit, or at least damage the paint and cause rust to get in there and bubble it. What I don't know is if this was pulled and bondoed at all. I don't know if the hood was painted. There is a little bit of bubbling rust here that we didn't cover because we've since kind of cleaned this. And you can tell we probably should clean it again. We didn't get everything in that power washing that we did. That's how just tough that stuff is to get off. But what we're going to eventually do is really scrub this, get all that stuff clean, and then we're going to try to buff this out. But we're probably going to need to do something to repair this or check it. Like I said, I don't know if there was any Bondo there. There's really no sign of it underneath. Let me grab my light. So there's signs of respray, it looks like, but I don't see signs of major Bondo work in there. Even up in here, like I said, maybe a little bit of respray up in here. Let me see if I can show you. So we'll have to dig a little deeper on that to really understand. But I think that's it in terms of accident damage. Like I said, I think a small hit here, either a new bumper cover was put on and painted or the original one was resprayed after it was repaired. I don't know if this is the original fender, but I think that it is. It looks like maybe it was just damaged a tiny bit. We'll know more when we really dig into this thing, but that's just the one thing I wanted to point out. But we're focusing on mechanicals today, and honestly, under the engine bay, everything looks pretty good. Obviously, one of the big things that we always want to look at on WJs is the water pump. This one so far seems dry. The belt, which I believe to be original, I don't see any markings on it right now, but the belt looks to be in okay shape. I can't remember if I ordered one. I have some parts already sitting in the back of the truck ready to go. But we'll probably pull some more stuff apart on here and just inspect it. But the engine does seem to run pretty good. And like I said, all in all, under here, it's pretty honest. We did a little bit of cleanup. It's a dirty engine bay like you'd expect, but everything looks pretty decent. I think the biggest thing that we're going to want to look out for here, just like any vehicle, is going to be vacuum hoses and things like that. And maybe a tune-up would be in order since we're coming up on 100,000 miles. All right, let's go ahead and put this thing up on the lift. All right, so before we get too far, I'd like to pull a wheel or two off and take a look at what we got going on. So these were not replaced, just in case you're curious. They're still the two pieces. So I feel pretty good that I bought the one piece ones to put on. so let's take a look. So first thing we're going to notice, look at the paint on the axle. I don't know if that's stock or not. I'd be kind of curious to know if it had an axle replacement. We'll know as soon as we look behind it. And that looks like a stock style boot. So I'd see no reason to assume that it was replaced. Ball joints all look original. The brakes themselves, well, we're going to be replacing them anyway, but they're looking kind of, they got, this one looks at least that it has enough pad material, but it does look pretty rusty under here. The rotors themselves are just kind of ratty and rusty, and I'm sure they could clean up. We haven't measured them to see if they're still in spec, but I think we're just going to go ahead and replace them. I think one of the things that I noted I was happy about was that our spring perch is still present. These things are really starting to rust out on WJs lately. Spring is there. Looks like our spring isolator looks pretty rough in there, though, I'll say that. Shocks look to be original, and they're a little rusty. We're actually going to put a new set on as a pretty easy, not upgrade necessarily, but fix. Look at that gap there between the bushing and the top of the shock. So this light's great until you need to do something. Go back to my little pen light here. Look at that. So we'll fix those up, but it looks like there's kind of a gap there. I could see that making some noise. But other than that, pretty clean on this side. Steering stuff all looks pretty original. I said that's solid, which is nice. Our pinion is dry, and everything looks good here. Like I said, from a rust perspective, not much rust at all, which is cool to see under here. Like I said, this is a pretty clean WJ so far. Basically, I just wanted to shake this thing a little bit. Oh boy. Yeah, it's not bad. Make sure we're not going to fall off our lift. I haven't had a car fall off yet, but all right, we're on there. So the wheels feel pretty solid up front. That's good. Let's go ahead and get it up the rest of the way. Just take a look underneath. So starting up front. Okay. So what's up with this? Look at here. See on our radiator how clean. So this is our condenser, which may also be our transmission cooler, depending on which setup this WJ has. But if you look at the radiator here, behind it, it looks pretty clean until you get over here. Look at this grunge in it. So is that just road dirt, or is that because something's leaking? So we're going to want to pressure test and check our cooling system just to be sure. But it kind of goes up in there. So hopefully it's nothing, but that's just something you're going to want to look at. All right, we got these big cables and everything for our RV tow. I wonder where those end up going when they go in there. We got more wiring for a front trailer hitch for the brake lights and everything. Like I said, I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to keep this or remove it. I'll probably keep it because, A, it's a nice front protection for this, but it's also some tow hook sections rather than getting WJ tow hooks. Looks like we have a crack in our fog lamp. Like I said, these always end up cracking. You can restore them, but you'll still have a crack. So I bought some aftermarket replacements. This one, though, looks like it's still good. That would probably clean up really well. All right, let's take a look underneath at our suspension. So I think the biggest issue that this WJ is going to have, that a lot of them have, is just dry rot of plastics and things like that. So look at that dry rot there on that bump stop. Bushings are all going to be dried and cracked. That's something that I'm not surprised by. That's just one of those things that as this thing ages, those components are going to wear out. So those should probably be on our list of future items, even though right now they don't look too bad, more rusty than anything else. And that's just, again, from sitting. When cars sit and the rains and you just get mud and grass and everything that grows up on them. I mean, that's just what does a lot of this stuff. So it'll actually clean up pretty good. And I think what we'll do is as we do that, we'll clean and replace all the rubber components, maybe upgrade or replace some of the steering components. And then while we're at it, go ahead and coat everything, make it really nice, rust preventative, etc. We are going to do our axles, the fluid in them. We do have a noise in the back. I'm pretty sure it's in the back at full turn. I don't think it's the transfer case. I think it's the rear quadri-drive axle making noise. So what we're going to do is swap the fluid, put the right friction modifier in, and hope that that solves it. Okay, let's find our oil leaks. All right. Hey, look, somebody put a sticker on. They write on them just like I do. C. Taylor on the 26th of March, 2021. So it has relatively recent oil. They're using a Wix 510085, so good, good, good. But I do see we have some oil seepage here, probably a front seal by the looks of it. It could be the oil pan, but it looks to me like the oil's running down from the top. We do want to inspect our harmonic balancer while we're under here. That looks okay. All these lines look pretty decent. Here's our thermostat and thermostat housing. We're actually going to be replacing that. That's a common failure on these. I'm going to go ahead and put new hoses on this as well. And well, getting the timing cover off is a real pain. So right now that's a, let me get my camera on it. That's a seep more than a leak, hopefully. So hopefully we're okay. Looking up in there, it's pretty dry. We'll want to look and try to source exactly where that's coming from. But I'm assuming it's oil. And it's probably just coming right out of this seal here. Yeah. I am not good with the camera today. So let's take a look at our motor mounts, and well, it's a little hard to see up top there, but this one, I can fit my finger in there, and I think that we're starting to collapse a little bit. That one definitely is starting to look collapsed. So some motor mounts might be in this truck's future as well, just in terms of making the ride smoother. That might give us a little more light. Frame rails all look pretty good. It's hard to see the rubber in our control arm bushings, but I suspect that they're going to be pretty worn. So we'll probably be doing control arm bushings at some point. Our vent line is still connected. Oxygen sensors are there. Exhaust looks decent. Not a ton of oil leaks. I'm used to seeing like this side. I know my old WJ had a lot of oil leaks in it all along this frame rail, and we never quite dealt with all of them. But this one's a lot drier. There is definitely some here. We can look up where it goes. It could be, looks like it's seeping a little out of the cover. I wonder if that's coolant at all seeping out there. We'll have to definitely dig closer on there and find out. But you know, oil pans are definitely a source on these. Could be valve covers, but it looks like this is all kind of lower, so maybe a little seepage out of the oil pan. But really pretty dry under here. I do see our starter back there. You can see it. It's kind of rusty. And the starter sounds a little rough on this thing when you run it. So I'm wondering if there's just a lot of rust and grime in the starter and how long that'll last. So that's probably going to be on our short list. But one thing we are doing on this truck, we're going to be replacing some of the battery cables and showing you how to do that, because that's one thing that a lot of these suffer from. So let's look up here and see what we see. And here's what I see. I see some wetness of some kind and just goo on that hose. And that goes back to what we were seeing with the grime on the front there. So we're going to have to look and see. Oh, stupid camera. We're going to have to look and see, do we need a radiator, or is it just leaking? Is it part of the transmission cooler? Is that even on this side? It's not the hydraulic fan. Let's see if I can point this up so you can see. This is really difficult to do one person. Hydraulic fan looks dry. We're going to do the power steering hoses and just look at some of the rust where that fitting is. So that's the kind of stuff that scares me in this climate, is that a lot of your hoses will look fine, but they have certain areas that they collect rust and you can blow a hose. Steering's dry, this side's dry. So yeah, looking pretty good, but we definitely have something on here. So we're going to want to pressure test our coolant system. We're going to want to dig into this deeper and find out really what it is. And I don't like this. Let me show you something. See if you agree with me, and I think you will. I don't like that this cable has been looped over the sway bar and is rubbing, like this is part of that cable as well, and it's just rubbing on these hoses, and it's even this shackle or ring has been rubbing on the coolant hose. It hasn't done any damage to it, but just having this stuff shaking around here all the time. I'm not a big fan of having things rubbing other stuff. So, but all in all, not bad. We're going to remove that and get that out of there. Same with the other side. Same with this side, which isn't quite as bad, but still an issue. Steering box is up there. I think you can see it in the camera, and it looks pretty decent. Not too wet. No fatigue or anything around our mounts here. It's not a Chevy. Looks like everything looks okay there. So we've only made it a few feet under the truck so far. We found a few things of concern that I'm going to want to dig in a little deeper, and we're going to do some preventative maintenance on this anyway, so we'll take closer looks at all those things as we're doing that. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing. There's not a ton of rust. There's surface rust from sitting. Most of the components look like you'd expect at the age and mileage of the vehicle, so all in all, pretty good. All right, so exhaust looks pretty decent, which is nice. Here's a big common thing for WJs. Look at the nasty hanger or clamp and hanger here. It's more than just, not the hanger's up top. The hanger actually looks pretty good. See, there's the hanger. But one of the things that's kind of nasty on this, and luckily they're intact, but see that ground? These grounds are notorious for breaking, and these clamps rust out pretty good too. So that's something that can actually cause you some electrical gremlins in its own. You lose these grounds. These act as grounds for the engine and electrical system. They can have problems when they start to break. There's a couple of them, and that's just one. Everything else, like I said, looks pretty good from what we can see. Like I said, I do see some rust on some of the lines there. We're going to want to take care of some of these before they become a problem, but most of them look pretty decent. Like I said, our pinion's not leaking. Let's try our, yeah, feels pretty solid. I think our drive shafts are in pretty good shape, but that brake line, not so much. And that's one thing that we'll do a shorts video on. Our biggest brake line issue in WJs is the one that goes to the rear. Transmission mount, again, probably has gotten pretty collapsed over the years. Transmission pan's got some rust on it as well, but I don't think it's anything going through it. But that's something to look at as we're pulling the fluid back here. We might decide to go ahead and change the pan while we're at it, while we have it off. I do see some wetness here. That's a little concerning. I know they usually take care and service their transmissions and stuff like that, so I don't know if it's just left over from a past service. It doesn't look like anything's leaking on the side here. And I do see some RTV. So my guess is this was just maybe from a recent service or a service done probably years ago. We do have leakage here. A lot of people think this is the rear main seal, but honestly it probably isn't. It's probably the oil pan and part of this rear support bracket here. I have to look up and regain my WJ knowledge on what it takes to solve those, but this one doesn't look too bad. I mean, it looks like it's pretty dry, probably because it's been sitting. We'll have to see as we run it, does that get worse? And that's one that it'll leak onto your exhaust and give you a nice oil smell while you're driving. Rust-wise though, we're looking pretty good. All of our frame rails look nice and clean. Our rocker panels, like I said, excellent. This Jeep is very, very rust-free and clean. Clamps not so great, but that's very common. Probably just cut those off and replace them. This frame rail and rocker, again, looking pretty good. All right, this one was supposedly just had the fluid done in it. We're probably going to do it again to do the Mopar stuff. Looks like there's a little bit of seepage out of the seal here, which is interesting. But if you remember some of our past WJ stuff, there's actually a rubber cap on the top that can leak. See that little rubber cap right there? So we're going to probably replace that proactively. But our 247J otherwise looks pretty good. Output seal on it isn't leaking. The little harmonic balancer on the drive shaft looks to be intact. The rubber hasn't separated. The drive shaft itself looks pretty good. This pinion's dry. So here's one we'll probably be doing. We'll go ahead and do our rear upper control arm. We've done this in the past too. This is pretty crusty looking, but hopefully isn't too bad. We could just replace the whole arm, but I've already bought the ball joint, and I got a sale on the bushings. I got the bushings for like $5 from TRW. So we're probably just going to replace those. All of our evap hoses we're going to want to take a close look at and just make sure nothing's here. If you've got a 2004, interesting note, your evap canister is back here. In the newer models, it was actually up front. So, but it's here, and some of these hoses can end up dry rotting over time, and you can get evap leaks. This one's not throwing any codes, but as you can see here, rust is a big problem on these, even in a otherwise clean vehicle. These brackets for this really just get crusty, and they start to fall apart pretty quick. This one looks bad. I mean, look, the whole rest of the truck looks pretty decent, and this looks rough. So I might get into the point where if there's enough need that I'll end up, making new ones of these. But for the time being, I don't, we're just going to do what we can do. Looks like we got the standard fuel tank cover. I don't think this is the full skid, but again, I'm kind of losing it on my WJ stuff a little bit. That's why we have one. We're going to get back in the game. We do have the trailer hitch. I did see some paperwork from a dealer visit. He had a bunch of recalls done, including they checked the trailer hitch for the installation there to help it from blowing up if you get rear-ended. Exhaust, like I said, looks pretty good. We do have some rusty hangers, rusty clamps. Look at that rubber though. Like, rubber is the biggest thing. So this is all stuff that can make noise, but it's also cheap, easy things that we can fix. But I'm more concerned about the health of the brake lines. And before we talk about the axle, this brake line we're going to replace because it looks pretty nasty. But one of the areas that they break almost all the time is right there where it clips in. You see how it looks worse there? It's usually the back few inches of this line is where you get a break. The whole rest of the line, sometimes they even look great on WJs, but this one spot, every WJ I've had has had this brake line fail. This one hasn't yet, which is kind of amazing, but it looks like it's not too far from happening. So if you've got a WJ and you haven't done this line, get under there and check it, especially around where it goes into this bracket in the last 6 inches or so. That's where all of them have pretty much broken. We are going to be replacing the brakes, the rotors, and all the brake lines. Maybe not all the hard lines, but all the rubber lines for sure. Shocks don't look too bad, but again, we're probably going to replace them because they're inexpensive and these are most likely worn out. And not to mention the rubber is probably perished on them. On the rear axle, so this cover looks pretty rough, but hopefully it won't have any pinholes in it. It certainly doesn't look like it's leaking. And it's hard to tell since they do use RTV, but this may have been serviced in the past. This is the one I think is making noise, so we're going to pull this one apart and we're going to do the fluid in all of them, but this one I'm going to pay special attention to and just take a look and see if we've got any issues from it. Hopefully not. So as we wrap things up here, as you can see, our WJ looks like a pretty honest Jeep underneath. Now it's got a lot of the common issues that a older WJ will have, and probably even less so than one that you might find with higher mileage. So with only 96,000 miles on the clock, things don't look too bad underneath. But it did sit for a number of years, and you can see just how much surface rust you get on components from the rain. The things sit in the grass and the mud, and the moisture just wicks its way up under the vehicle. Fortunately, the structure of this truck is completely awesome. I see no signs of any pervasive rust. We can probably coat some things to keep it even better so it'll never spread. But the fact that this thing is as old as it is and looks as nice as it does is definitely a great thing. Obviously, anything rubber is just age more than mileage. But while a lot of the rubber components might have a lot of cracking in them from their age, the actual mechanical feel of everything, like your ball joints, your tie rods, everything still feels pretty tight, which is good. So what I kind of foresee with this vehicle, what we'll probably do is, I'd like to use this during the winter here as kind of a winter beater, something to drive around town and keep the newer stuff, or, obviously the town car is not going to work in the snow. So this would be great for the winter. And we'll probably do a few things just to get it ready for that, and then maybe some more things later on. So what I'm thinking is, right off the bat, we'll go ahead and take care of the brake lines that look a little suspect. While we're at it, we'll flush the brake fluid. We'll put new rubber lines on, and while I'm at it, I went ahead and picked up a full brake kit. So we're going to put all new brakes on this thing, new calipers, because honestly, my experience is the WJs, especially the rear calipers, seem to be prone to lockups as the fluid and the age of them gets old. So we're just going to take care of that stuff. It's pretty inexpensive, and we'll have nice new brakes and lines on this thing. We'll feel nice and safe when we're driving it. I think the tires are fine, at least for the winter. We'll keep an eye on them, but fortunately, I see no signs of dry rotting. They're a little bit old, but I think they've probably got some time left in them. Certainly got a lot of tread. The last thing we'll probably do, though, for the winter time, kind of jumping around because I got no script, is I am going to do a fluid service on everything. Now, I know it had oil recently, and I know the transfer case was done recently, but I don't know if they used the right Mopar stuff in the transfer case. And I know those 247s are a little bit finicky with the fluid they have. So I want to get fluid, good known fluid in that. The axles being the quadra-drive axles, I want to put fresh fluid with the right Mopar friction modifier in them. And then the oil change just in general. I mean, it's sat for so long. I want to put fresh oil in it just to have it. We'll check out the cooling system while we're at it. I did get a whole bunch of stuff for that. I'll probably do it because it really shouldn't take that long, but I am a little bit concerned if we have an issue with the radiator, but I'd rather find that out now than in the middle of the winter when I'm driving. So hopefully that doesn't cause us any issues. But all in all, I think this is a pretty solid WJ. Now, we'll do our best to bring cameras along for this. That's one of the reasons I bought it was, to have kind of as the winter beater and whatnot, because I do kind of miss having a WJ. But I know that a lot of people always ask for WJ content. And I thought, well, one good way to have WJ content is to have a WJ and to have one that hasn't had a lot of the things done to it. So when we do the work on it, we'll bring cameras and we'll show you what we do and we'll share our experiences with you. So if you like this, do us a favor, like the video, drop us a comment, tell us about your WJ or what you liked or didn't like about this one. And of course, do us a big favor and subscribe because we'll have plenty more WJ content along with other stuff here at Vortex Garage.